Welcome along to the fourth installment in our video tutorial series where we're learning how to create a space shooter game using Pygame Zero. In the first three videos, as you can see here, we got our little spaceship created and it can move around using arrow keys and shoot using the spacebar. We've also got the scrolling background in now as well to make it appear as though we are flying through space. Okay, so let's get stuck into the next part of the tutorial where we are going to add in an enemy. Actually, multiple enemies. Okay, so what we're going to do here is basically have enemies appear at random times and in random positions from the top of the screen, and they'll be flying down the screen, and if we run into them we will eventually end up dying, but for now we're just going to get the enemies flying down the page. Alrighty, so to begin with, we're going to start near the top of the page here, above the update function. Okay, make a little bit of room there. And I'm going to put in a comment first of all that just says create an empty list to hold multiple enemies on the screen at once. So similar to the background situation we had and to the bullet situation, we're going to create an empty list that can hold a heap of enemies on the screen at any one time. So I've created a list called enemies, and it's a blank list at the moment with nothing inside of it. We will populate that list later on once the enemies start appearing on the screen. Okay, I think that's all we need to add into that top section, so we can come down now into the update section, so into the update function. Remember, that's where we put all our code to make our game work. So I'm going to scroll all the way down, so we're just above that define draw area, and we're going to start adding in some code. So we're going to get these enemies appearing, as I said, in random locations and at random times as well. So let's put in a comment first of all, and I might say add enemies to the enemies list at random times. Okay, now to start with, we're going to put in an if statement, and we're going to say if random.randint. So that's accessing that random function that we import at the top here. Okay, so it's going to go into that extension pack basically, or into that library of code, and look for a function called randint, which is short for random integer. And we're going to create, we're going to put in some brackets and write 0, 1000, and that's basically going to get the computer to pick a random number or a random integer anywhere between 0 and 1000. Okay, and if that number is greater than say 980, then we are going to create an enemy. Okay, I'll get you to play around with that number later on and see what sort of effect that has on your game, but for now we'll just keep adding in a little bit more code. So we're going to write in a variable called enemy, and we're going to assign an actor to it. Okay, and that actor is going to be enemy, actually be enemy1 underscore 1. Whoops, my E has a little hyphen above it. I just need to put in quotation marks. That's what I was meant to do before. There we go. So enemy 1 of 1. And if you look in your images folder, actually it's not image. I had my name a bit mixed up there. It's just enemy 1. Sorry, I'm confusing myself. So the enemy variable is equal to actor, and it is enemy 1. Okay, that guy just there. My bad. I forgot I renamed them before I made this video. Okay, and once we have created that actor, we are going to add it into our enemies list. So write enemies.append, and then in brackets we're going to add that enemy ship here, that variable, into the enemies list. Alright, I'm using the word enemy a lot here. If you think back to the last video, I used the word background a lot. Hopefully I'm not confusing you too much, but remember this enemies list here is empty when we start the game. Okay, eventually as the game kicks off, we will be adding the first enemy into that list, and we'll keep adding enemies into that list as they appear on the screen. Okay, now we need to set up the start position for when an enemy does appear on the screen. So I might put in a comment here that says set the enemy start position to a random spot above the top of the screen. Okay, so they're going to appear just outside our screen and they're going to fly down the page onto our screen. Okay, so we'll write enemy.x first of all, so the horizontal axis here, and that's going to be equal to a random number, so we'll write random.randint, and it's going to be anywhere between, say, 100 pixels and 700 pixels. Remember, our screen width is 800 pixels wide, so that definitely gets our ship appearing, or our enemy ships appearing somewhere on the screen on the x-axis. We're going to set the y position, so enemy.y to just above the top of the screen, so we can't see it initially. So we'll put -50, and then it will, in a moment, we'll get it to fly down onto the screen. Okay. So that looks pretty good so far. Let's keep going. So the next thing we'll do is write enemy dot images, and we're going to set it equal to, and then in square brackets, enemy one. Oops, I forgot to do my quotation marks. What's going on there? There it is. And then enemy one. Sorry, making typos with my new keyboard I've got. Not working too well. And then enemy 2. Alright, so that's going to set both enemy images that we've got in our images folder here, enemy 1 and 2, into a list. Now, if you look closely, I'll zoom in here, there's some little like jets on the back of our enemies there, and if you scroll between enemy 1 and 2, those little jets just slightly move. So we're going to have a little animation, I guess, on our enemy ships. It's barely worth doing, but I'm going to show you how to do it anyway. You can make little animations appear on your enemies, so it makes it look if they're flying through the screen with some fire coming out the back through their little jets or afterburners, whatever you call them. So that's why I've got 2 enemy images there. Probably would have been easy just to have one, but anyway, we'll carry on. I'll put a comment here, set both enemy images to a list. Alright, let's keep kicking on. So we're going to write enemy.fps next, which stands for frames per second. This is the animation I was talking about with those little jets on the back of the ship. How fast do we want them moving? We're going to set it to 5, which means they're going to change up to 5 times per second. Okay, so I'll put a comment in there. Change the images 5 times per second. So they'll flick between each other 5 times per second to make it look like a realistic animation. The other thing we need to do is just get the enemy flying down the page. So we'll write enemy.direction. And we're going to set that equal to random.randint. So again, we're going to look for a random integer anywhere between -100 and -80. That is, in that negatives there, that is heading down towards the bottom of the screen. And we're going to choose a random direction for those ships to fly in. So they're not all just flying straight down the page. Some of them are moving off to the side a little bit, just to try and make the game a little bit harder. Okay, I should probably put in a comment, explain that last bit as well. So we'll just say, move the enemies in a random direction towards the bottom of the screen. Okay, that looks pretty good. What can we do now? So I don't think that's going to work just yet, but I'm going to draw them on the screen anyway and just see how they go. So down in the draw function, underneath the bullets there, I might put this one in, and I'll just say draw the enemies. Now, because we're going to have multiple enemies on the screen at once, just like with the bullets and the backgrounds, we're going to need to create a loop. So we'll just write for enemy in enemies, put a colon, and write enemy.draw. Now we'll test this out, not sure if it's going to work or not. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, I wasn't expecting it to work just yet. So no enemies coming onto the screen just yet. We've got a little bit more code to add up in this update function. So again, go above the draw function here, back to where we were before. And we'll put in the last little section. So what we need to do here is basically write a loop. It's going to go through that enemies list, and we are going to get the enemies in that list moving down the page. That's why they're not showing up yet. We haven't actually given them a speed to move down the page. So let's do that now. So I might put in a comment that just says, oops, I won't say write a loop, I'll just say apply the following code to all enemies on the screen. Say currently on the screen. Okay, so we're going to write for enemy in enemies. So we're looking through that enemies list, and we're going to apply this code to enemy that is on the screen at this current point in time. So we'll write enemy.move underscore in underscore direction. Okay, that's another fancy function in Python, and we're going to move it in direction. We mentioned earlier what direction to move in. Yeah, we have over here. Okay, and we're going to move it down at a speed of 4. So I'll put in a comment that probably says that. So make our enemy move in random direction we set earlier. That was up here. At speed 4. So we'll adjust that speed for later on and see what sort of effect that has on our enemies moving down the page, whether we want them faster or slower. As they're moving down the page, we're going to write enemy.animate, open and close a bracket. That's going to animate our enemies so that little afterburner or the jets at the back look like they're flickering a little bit. So I might just say switch between the two enemy images. That'll just occur over and over again to make it look like an animation. And the last thing we want to do is just make sure those enemies, when they fly off the bottom of the screen, that we remove them from the game. Like with the bullets, we don't want them floating around just in the middle of nowhere off the screen, because it will slow our game down until it crashes. So we'll just delete those enemies as they disappear off the bottom of the page. So I'm going to put in, actually I'll put a comment first of all. It says remove the enemies and they fly off the screen. Right, if enemy.y is greater than 700, so that's below the bottom of our page. Our screen is 600 pixels in height, so once it's the 700 mark, it's well and truly off the page. We'll write enemies.remove, so we're looking at that enemies list, and we are going to remove the enemy that has flown off the page. Alright, a little bit confusing that, but let's give it a run and see what happens. Okay, here come our enemies, and they are flying straight down the bottom of the page and disappearing. Okay, you can see them slightly moving off to the right, some moving slightly off to the left, some coming straight down. Okay, that's that random position that we told them to move in over here. Alright, we can't do anything to these enemies yet. We can run into them, we can shoot them all we want, but nothing is actually going to happen just yet. So that's going to come in a later tutorial. I've probably confused you enough for now. So I'm going to stop that and I'll finish up the tutorial here. So you've now got enemies added to your game, which is pretty cool. What we'll do next is have a look at destroying those enemies with our bullets. And we also eventually have a look at the collisions to end our game. So when those enemies run into us, then we will call it game over. Alright, I'm going to stop it now and I will see you in the next video.